Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Red Pilled Fiction Factory. I'm Richard Nichols, the host. I'd like to apologise for the long delay between the last episode and this one. I have no proper excuse, decent excuses, except for one. We did have a hurricane pass through the area and it knocked all the communications and trees down for a large zone, in a large zone around us, so that put the kibosh on many interviews. But here we are, we're back again. Today I've got an English writer, a second English writer, Benjamin Saxon, who's written a book called The Buddha and the Wolf. And I'd like to introduce Benjamin. How are you, Benjamin?
Yes, I'm doing well, Richard. Nice to join you, and good to join your audience too.
Very good. You're in Essex in England. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and where you come from and so on.
Excellent. So, yes, I'm Benjamin Saxon, the author of The Buddha and the Wolf. And The Buddha and the Wolf is my debut novel. And The Buddha and the Wolf is really a culmination of my spiritual journey over the last 10 years. And how I've kind of interpreted that journey. So my background is in philosophy. I trained under an Oxford Don, a fellow writer called Arthur Gibson. He wrote a book called God and the Universe. And this was kind of where my inspiration with philosophy really began. And after I left university, I found that there wasn't really much call for philosophers out in Essex. I realised quite how niche it was. And so what that kind of prompted me to do was, I suppose, find my own philosophy and through spiritual practices. And so after 15 years of that, I came to an idea for the book. And after another 6 years of writing, it got to this point that I now have this finished book. So it's a kind of, I suppose my background is really philosophy, and how the book is how I'm sharing that philosophy.
Something that will become evident as we go along is that the book is not, or the subject and the way you've portrayed the subject matter is not traditional red-pilled way. I don't know if there is a traditional red-pilled way, and that's one of the reasons I run this series, is because there are people coming from all kinds of angles and using all different styles to present their ultimately red-pilled ideas. Yours draws very heavily on Eastern mysticism and spirituality, which one would not normally associate with the red-pilled cause. But there we are. That's where we're at in this world.
What would be for you the kind of clearest, if you like, definition of red pill? Because there is a lot of different.
I mean, you could, I suppose, an extreme. You point at something like Conan the Barbarian films or something, which is one. It's a bit cartoonish and stuff, but they came from novels that were very highly respected in their day, and they do portray a philosophy of sort of right of centre, not taking any crap type philosophy.
And so does that philosophy kind of predate the Matrix? Because for my generation growing up, that red pill idea often is very much associated with the Matrix and that kind of the awakening of Neo, so to speak.
That's a very good point, and I think that would be a fantastic area to explore. I chose red-pilled in the end because it's a word that is a perfect summing up of the situation and from the film, The Matrix, but it's also a little less. It doesn't bring as much baggage as, say, right of centre or left or anything, which will just attract all kinds of problems. So. The two, how much they overlap and how much they are side by side is interesting. And I suppose with your novel, we're talking more side by side than a direct overlap. But there are areas that overlap. I think this is an issue that's been brought to light in my personal life and probably with other people recently with the whole COVID hysteria. I've been amazed at the kind of people who are on my side. Are not necessarily the ones I would have picked out a year and a half ago as being on my side. They humble little old widowers are very staunchly anti-vax and anti-mask and think the whole thing's nonsense, and you get a macho, TV star like The Rock or somebody who's encouraging us all to get vaccinated, and it's shown that it's a complicated, very nuanced division, and really it's something that needs exploring, because I think it's caught everyone by surprise, this element.
Here, I think in the UK there is a sort of almost a feeling of a rerun of the Brexit debates. There's some similarities there in terms of politically how the split has gone.
Absolutely, I think that's that sums up really what I'm saying. The red pill and the, let's say, right of centre, more right of centre philosophy, and it's beginning to look, and it's something I explore in my book, that politics is a lot less about politics than we think. It's much more about other, whether tribal or psychological issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the politics is almost like the decoration on the top, the red or the blue rosette, but there's something much more fundamental at work, which I think this is revealing, and I actually think it was done on purpose. Whoever's manipulating this, I think they know what they're doing, for better or for worse, and I don't know what their end goal is yet, but it seems clear to me that they are controlling their narrative on purpose to encourage.
It feels like we're following a script.
It does, yeah.
I think for me, one of the biggest red flags was really at the beginning when so Bill Gates randomly popped up on the BBC on Easter Sunday, and it was March, I believe. Well, no, Easter would have been at the end of March, so maybe March, early April. And you know how Bill is, kind of slightly nasally whine and all hand gestures, and he was talking away, and he was telling everyone that the only way out would be to get the vaccine to everyone on the planet. On the planet. And my mind was blown that we could have been in this situation literally a month and a half by that point. We'd only just gone into lockdown, maybe 2 weeks. Boris Johnson had done his kind of, Jesus Christ, dying of COVID and ascending again on Easter Sunday impression. And then suddenly Bill Gates turns up like the high priest to give us the way out of this. And what's been, for me, most interesting is the situation has literally followed that pronouncement to the letter to where we are now, a year and a half later.
You can almost see someone behind the screens going, all right, cut, let's bring on the next episode. It starts here, ready, action.
And I think for me, because of my philosophical training, I've always had a skepticism, and I'd say for me that's part of what my red pill journey is about, if you like, that kind of philosophical way of looking at the world. The kind of Socrates, the wisest one is who knows they know nothing. So you have to kind of be out there really trying to know, and with that trying to know, there comes this skepticism of what you are being told. You begin to understand that there are layers of narrative and propaganda that are put in front of you, and actually your job isn't just to kind of greedily gobble them up. It's to actually kind of have some discernment and try to cut through and get to the true nature of reality.
It's the only problem is telling other people to try that or even get their head around that, isn't it? And first of all, tear them away from the TV screen or whatever it is that's already
the programming, isn't it?
Yeah, programming. I've got a few notes here. You describe yourself as a grounded, no-nonsense Englishman. That's coming across already.
It's the Essex. It's the Essex way.
Yes, for those international viewers, Essex is a very successful county. It's a county region, a region of England called the county. It's very successful, very wealthy, but it's not known for its class. It's known, or its style. It's known for, I'm being as polite as I can.
That's true.
It's known for its results. It gets
we're
results.
kind of most famous for our contribution to TV programming. The Only Way is Essex. Which
Right.
If we were to look for an example of classlessness, the Only Way in Essex would be a good place to start. I suppose the easiest way I'd sum it up is it's a kind of working class county made good
Yes.
the back of kind of London's never-ending boom, if you like.
Yeah, true. That's a good way of putting it. Your surname's Saxon. That's a real name, not a pen name.
It is well, it's a legal pen name. Let's put it like that. It's a legal name.
I think it's terrific. Are there any Saxons in England? Are people called Saxon, or
they are? I did have a little check. There are a few. It's rare. It's rare.
Okay, very good. I like it.
It was a pen name that I liked so much that I made it my own name.
Very good. Sounds good. Now, the novel is told in for the readers, for the audience's sake, it's an old-fashioned fable. It could have been written by Aesop almost, or some guru sitting on a mountaintop in Tibet. It's very simple style, very clear. There are 2 or 3 protagonists. Including one is a wolf. You see things from the perspective of a wolf. And it's set in a. I've got a note here. It's set in a timeless, nameless environment, which seems Eastern at times, but could really almost be anywhere in a kind of medieval setting. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's medieval. It's just a simple. It's set often in woods, for example, monasteries, cottages. You don't really know much about the details. The only reference to an actual place is Wallachia.
Wallachia is, I think, how it's pronounced.
Okay, it's in modern-day Romania, which is modern-day Romania.
Well picked up, Richard. Yes.
It threw me a bit because until then I'd had it happily placed in sort of northern China or somewhere. But
interesting.
Well, the Buddha connection.
Yes.
Now,
I went for, so to sort of jump in on that, because I wanted to create that fable type place, and I really wanted to kind of go for that traditional, almost Western mythological landscape, which is the landscape of the forest. You know, you've got like the monasteries, and then you have those traditional archetype characters. So the wise woman, the warrior, the wolf itself. We've got the mystic, the red-headed girl. There's all of these archetypes, but the main protagonist, little Buddha, he is this Buddhist archetype. So what kind of emerged as I was creating it was I realized I was exploring, you know, those values, those Buddhist values, the mindfulness, the sense of duty, being present, meditative techniques, but seeing how they kind of fared in a very Western mythological landscape.
Okay, yeah, apart from the fact that he wears an orange, you refer to him as the Orange Man occasionally, he wears an orange monastery uniform. I mean, that threw me a bit because that puts it more in the East. But apart from that, it could be medieval Britain or something where he was having like a Robin Hood type environment. Now, it starts in a monastery. Now, the monastery serves to so you very successfully use it to recreate the sort of stifling drudgery of modern life. This is my interpretation anyway. Somewhat dingy, but not particularly satisfying for anyone who's in there. But it does offer security. It does offer herd immunity, if you like, in the sense that everyone's around you doing the same thing. No one's challenging themselves or being challenged or in any danger, really. And they simply live out their days within it, going through the motions of existence. That really, it's meant to represent, I presume, modern Western society to an extent.
Yes, I wanted to get that sense of an allegory so that people could reflect upon some of those traps of comfort, if you like, that we also live in.
Sorry, I lost you there a minute. The sense of calm.
Yes. So I was saying, I kind of wanted to, you pick up on that very correctly, Richard. I wanted to kind of really make that link for the reader with these kind of traps of comfort that we can fall into in our own lives.
Yeah. No, it's a clever way of doing it because, and I think that's what monasteries did in the old days, reflecting on it. I think they sucked in a lot of the people who couldn't really, well, they called themselves monks and they had a religious dedication, but really they were the people who had fallen between the cracks of normal life and needed an environment that sustained them as much as, or more so than the normal environment would. Now, the young monk, the young Buddha, he obviously feels a bit different, and we learn he's a bit like a Moses character in that he was found almost in the rushes and saved by the head monk. But he obviously feels a little bit out of place and resolves to leave the confines of the monastery in his search for the wolf, which is a metaphor, it seems, for finding your true self and achieving your full potential. Was that roughly where?
Yes, definitely. So the inspiration for the novel came from a teaching tool from ancient China that I learnt about while studying Zen meditation, and it was called the ox herding plates. So the ox herding plates was a series of 10 pictures of a boy looking for an ox, and the idea was that you could tell the journey of awakening, or teach the journey of awakening to lay people that were illiterate at the time, through pictures and symbols that they could understand. And when I learnt about this idea, Richard, it really resonated with me, because often these ideas of awakening, the true self, authenticity, they can be quite hard to get across, and they can often be quite shrouded in very sort of esoteric ways of talking about them. And what I loved was that this was a way of getting it to the people in a way that they could understand. And how I got the idea for the book was I started a new job, and I had a little Buddha statue that I'd had for a very long time, and the people from my previous job knew that I was really into wolves, and they gave me a wolf. So I got to the new job, put them on the desk, and I was like, oh, look at that. The Buddha and the wolf. The Buddha and the wolf, you know, that's got a ring to it. And I had a punishing commute at the time. It was something like 15 hours per week. So I decided, rather than kind of doom scroll on my phone for 15 hours, I would start writing and take this idea, and that was where it began. So you're spot on. The search for the wolf is very much representing that idea of the true self, and that is kind of baked into the book, because the inspiration that kind of gave the book its structure was these pictures that were about that journey.
I don't know the ox herding plates themselves, but if that's the case, so as you say, he escapes from the monastery against the wishes of everyone else, really, and the book is a series of engagements with the variety of characters within the wilder environs of the monastery, in the forest and so on. He comes across, amongst others, a warrior, a woodcutter, an old lady, a young lady, and so on, doesn't he?
Yes.
And these are it's very much the hero's journey in a way. He breaks free, and these are the stages of self-realization.
Mm-hmm.
To give people a flavour, one of the people he meets is the warrior. He's an old warrior, I think, who reflects on who takes care of him and teaches him a few things along the way, but reflects on his previous existence as a warrior. And he says, "When I remember my home, I want to cry. My city across the blue sea was a strong and proud city. Men had honor. The women walked the streets safely and children respected their elders. We called this beautiful city home of dignity, but no more. The men's honor has fled. Women cannot walk unaccompanied and the children rob their elders. Now we call it Knife City. I've seen men die over a bag of rice as sickness has taken hold over their minds." And that gives you the audience an idea of the style, but also your red-pilledness showing through there. Speaking forbidden thoughts.
Yes.
It could be better in a different way if we did things a different way.
And that was, I really wanted to kind of reflect on this idea of, that we are in that Knife City, the home of dignity that has become Knife City. That could be many, many capitals across the world. where life has now become so cheap, where the safety and security of people has become more and more and more devalued. And, yes, that is kind of part of it. These are the uncomfortable facts, if you like, in this red-pilled idea that we do need to start waking up to.
It's ironic, isn't it, that you mentioned their security is being destroyed, and yet it was the quest for security that led to this in a way. It was their desire to have cradle-to-grave welfare and NHS and a sort of a monastery-type environment that has led to the disintegration of what was a very successful and caring society before. One has been destroyed on purpose, but it really hasn't found its replacement, a successful replacement. But it's always the quest for greater security, less risk, that leads to greater risk and less security, sadly. So go on, talk us through his journey through the forest in a paraphrased version, obviously, but tell us how he ventures and where it leads him.
So what I really wanted to do was kind of explore different aspects to the kind of New Age spiritual scene, because it's where I kind of really came of age, if you like. I've taught yoga for the last 15 years.
Really? That's fascinating. Yeah. So you do practice the Eastern.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I've practiced yoga for the last and taught yoga for the last 15 years. I've also taught and learned trained in Zen meditation and mindfulness. I've been involved in sound healing. So I played the gong and various other crystal bowls and different instruments to create that kind of relaxing ambience. So you remember at the beginning in the monastery, there's the gong playing. So again, that's my experience in the world of sound. And the point where the Buddha has the tea, and it takes him onto this very kind of mystical, psychedelic experience. I drew on my own history working with South American plant medicines quite extensively. So there's a lot of different aspects of spirituality that are kind of running through the story. And while he's on this journey in the woods, it's really about kind of how do these aspects work together and start to tell a new story, because the spirituality that's kind of started to arise in the West kind of after the fall of kind of Christianity, if you like, it's very much a kind of hodgepodge, for want of a better word. It's a very kind of mixed pot. There's, everyone's got a statue of Buddha in their house, but no one knows what Buddhism is. Most people's wives practice yoga, but they've no idea about anything else other than physical postures.
Yeah, exercise.
Yeah, exactly. So it's this and then we've become very kind of disconnected from our own history within that, so it's a strange kind of spirituality that's arising. But it's again that even in this kind of atheist time, that there is a whole spiritual revival that is happening, and it's very much kind of one that's been commercialized and what's the word, kind of bought and sold, and it's got that commercial aspect to it. Modified. But there's no denying that there is a movement that's starting to happen, which is groping, if you like, and trying to replace what has been lost. Because when you take that spiritual kind of heart and rip it out of society, which is what's happened with the fall of Christianity, you've got a dead society. And so really, I honestly believe the only way that we can renew society is that we have to start to explore spirituality again and try and make it something kind of living and exciting. I could have easily put my last 15 years of experience into a self-help book. And when I started giving this to publishers, the feedback my agent got was, it's great, but he should write a self-help book. We sell loads of self-help books. And it's like, and they sit on people's things. Maybe they read them once for a week, and then they forget about those self-help books. because we learn through stories. And so I went off on a bit of a tangent here, Richard, but it's really kind of a lot of what I'm exploring is the New Age movement, if you like, the New Age spirituality, which is a global spirituality, if you like, that's kind of drawing on Eastern elements. It's drawing on kind of South American elements. It's drawing on kind of historic practices within Europe. You know, there's some, I feel there is something kind of starting to bubble that I think the pressure now that is being applied in this kind of COVID context, which is forcing people to split. And really what we're going to see, I feel, is this choice between science and the kind of pharmaceuticalization of life.
Well,
and
the religion of science on one hand.
Yes,
and
the religion of science, exactly. That is, you know, the holy sacrament of the vaccine, so to speak. This is a new emerging religion, and there's a lot of people that don't want that. And I think there is then going to be a counter movement, if you like, for, you know, one of the things that I talk about in the book is this idea of awakening, a kind of mass red pilling, if you like, of people that are going to be pushed that way, because there's a fundamental, if you like, war being fought at the moment for the soul of humanity. And I don't think that's hyperbole. Actually, it's not how we talk.
Put. Absolutely brilliantly put. This should be compulsory viewing for millions of people. Well said. I totally agree. I think we're seeing it in a lot of the pundits. I follow James Delingpole. There's a guy called Vox Day. There's a lot of others in America who they've gone from being red-pilled, and red-pilled is like the first stage. Some have taken a route that's called black-pilled, which means they've just given up on the whole world because they've looked over the abyss and they can't see a way out, so they're black-pilled. But a lot have become, if you don't want black-pilled, and obviously you want to try and avoid that, it's too depressing. There's something called God-pilled happening now, where a lot of people who...
I've heard similar. Gold pill, I've heard as well.
The what?
Gold pill, I've heard as well.
Yeah, gold pill. So we're seeing it in real time in front of us happening, but also in personal experiences and stuff. These pundits are saying that they're finding the people who read them and stuff are following them down this path. And these are often people who are very cynical about religion, even as recently as a year or two ago. Out of interest, have you heard of something called RK selection theory? It came up a lot when I was reading your book. It's it explains it in biological terms. It's called RK selection theory. It's been around for a while, but only recently did people apply it to humans and society. It basically applies to nature, and the two examples they give are the rabbit and the wolf, and that's why. And the rabbit basically
sounds like a bit of me already.
Well, you might find something in it. I've been fascinated by it for a while because it provides a scientific backing for a lot of the things that we're analysing. The rabbit basically eats the grass until there's no grass, in which case there's a massive die-off. But while there's grass, it's happy, it's eating, it's breeding, and really nothing else matters. And society has been in that nirvana state for quite a while now. Everyone's had, in the West anyway, they've had what they want, and it's really just come down to a sexual orgy for the last 20 or 30 years with lots of food and no issues.
Hedonism and individualism, hedonism, and consumerism.
And there are lots
of the Holy Trinity.
Yes, and I'm just giving you the very brief outline, but some of the spin-offs, for example, is when you're a rabbit, you don't really care about your children. You have lots. In our case, we have contraceptives and stuff, so they don't actually get born, but we have lots of the sex. But you don't care about the children. Once they're born, they're basically on their own, which is also something we're seeing in modern society. You see the masculization of women in rabbit societies. The females take over a lot of the roles of the male because the male's too busy shagging other females and eating. So, and the men become feminized. You know, there's no big strong rabbits that come rescue the family or anything. They don't care. They're just off shagging someone else. Anyway, the counter to that is the wolf, which lives a very different life. He can die. He knows he can die almost any time because they never live in a meat-rich environment. I mean, they might occasionally get a kill, but their life is very much closer to the bone, and so they have to calculate. They invest a lot in few infants, for example. They don't have too many children, but the ones they have last them for years until because they've got to. If their genes are going to succeed, they have to make sure the young cub survives into maturity. Anyway, highly recommend it. And anyone else who's listening, look into RK selection theory because it really explains. But one of the main things, and the reason I mention it, is it explains spirituality. It says that when you are in the wolf state, you need more than just with the rabbits. It's hedonism and who cares about tomorrow. It's
yes.
But the wolf is something to guide him, like a pole star that says, "Keep going. This is for you. This is the way." Anyway, and we are now entering perhaps the stage of these things come and go. When the resources run out for the rabbits, they they die off. But the wolf takes over, if you like, and he will survive. The key. Speaking of the wolf, here's an excerpt from the book again, and it's the wolf talking, which I thought was quite novel. He's into a fight now, and this brings us. This actually it serves my previous point well. Case-selected creatures like wolves believe in hierarchies. Rabbits don't have hierarchies. There's no leader of the pack in a rabbit warren, for example. But wolves obviously are known for their alphas. And here's the wolf. He's been a bit of an outcast, but he's coming back into the pack, and he's attacked by the other wolves. A shadow charges me from the gloom. I meet it head on, and we tumble to the ground, jaws snapping. Another shadow jumps towards me, but I roll quickly, and the two shadows crash into the wall, mauling each other in confusion. One is pack leader. I blindside him. My teeth wrap around his lower jaw. He freezes, his eyes gaze into mine. There is no message, just sorrow, pain, and the silent rage of defeat. A pitiful cry fills the den as I swing his head towards the wall. The muscles in his jaw start to split as the bones fracture. There is a horrible crack as I snap his jaw. His head flies back and blood spurts from his ruined snout. I howl the cry of victory, the howl of the pack leader. And then skipping a little bit further, today I have reclaimed the wolf within, ruthless, loyal, and triumphant. Those who would have killed me have been defeated. I have shown them to be cowards. I have overcome the sickness that consumed me. I have returned from the brink of death and destroyed those who wanted me dead. Today, the reign of the pack leader has ended. Maybe I should have found a dark hole where I could have laid down and waited for the sickness to claim me for its own. But this is not the way of the wolf. The way of the wolf is to follow the flow. Each step I take has been guided by a force that exists beyond me. It runs through me while allowing me to roam free. Its only law is survival, and this law I have obeyed. Lovely writing, and I think it's a very good example of why people should pick up this book and enjoy it themselves. It's superficially, it could almost be read by children, I presume. Have you come across children?
It's got that kind of fabulistic quality, but it's also, but like that kind of passage you read there, there's a grit to it as well, because I think the spirituality needs some grit. Otherwise it becomes too wishy-washy. Spirituality has been used from time immemorial in our societies to provide a real strong container, and to provide, as you said, that pole star that gives guidance. And it can't be too fluffy,
No.
And so I think the book is, and especially with the character of the wolf, he provides that real raw edge to it, that connection to nature, which has that savagery, and that part of us is important. It needs to be reclaimed and integrated, because we've got to the point that we've kind of pushed away that hard edge, because we do live in, as you say, quite rightly, rabbit times, where we are in those kind of times of abundance. But I have a lot of faith that people will be able to reclaim as these times become more challenging, as they have. And I think we are just at the kind of the beginning of that road of this time of challenge for humanity. People will reclaim that inner wolf. You know, it is there.
It's the old hard times make soft, make whatever. I always get it wrong. But, you know,
hard times
good
make
men,
strong men.
strong men.
Strong men make good times. Good times make weak men. Weak men make hard times.
That's where we're at. We're just at the cusp of that. And that's arcade selection again. That's a very arcade selection. It's a cycle.
No empire lasts forever. And, you know, nor should it. You know, and I don't think there's, you know, we can't mourn the past. You know, we have to be in the present and working to create the future. And that again is one of the, yes.
The wolf should follow the flow. He's not fighting against nature, he's going with it. But is recognizing that you can influence your own life within the greater flux and ebb and flow of society. You had a very, you alluded to earlier, you had a very unusual writing style. I think this is well worth picking up on, because most people who write, and most of the interviewees I've had, basically sat at a typewriter or a computer and plugged away at it until they wasting out their lives at night or whatever. But you cleverly decided to make the most of your 16-hour commute a week and an iPhone of all things. I don't know how. But, go on, talk us through the process for new writers who might pick up that they can spend their time more constructively than looking at Twitter.
Exactly. So it was, as we've said, I had this very long commute and a long period of dead time. And the idea for the Buddha and the Wolf very early on. And I've always loved reading, but I've never been much of a writer. And something just clicked with the idea, and I started to write on the train. So what I would do, I would sit on the train and hand draft each chapter. So by that I mean just I've got a kind of quite scrawly sort of doctor's handwriting there, and so I would just sit and scrawl away in the mornings, and then in the evenings I had this trusty little iPhone 6S that I would type up on. At one point I could kind of do it on the angle and type, and that pretty much got me to the first draft. And even now my kind of commute's changed, and I must admit I find it a lot harder to write. And anytime I'm on the train, I have my notepad with me, because I can just get into such a zone in that space, because I've got nowhere else to be. You know, it's just perfect for me anyway, the perfect writing time.
Very good. And you've at the end of the Buddha and the Wolf, there's a suggestion you're quite well into a sequel of some sort. Is that correct?
Yes. So book 2 is
looks like quite different from it's only a few paragraphs that you give as an excerpt, but it looks like a completely different background to it. Go on.
So it is the same character. I'm taking forward this journey of Buddhism. However, book 2, I kind of really want a step change and a style change, a bit how there was from kind of with Hermann Hesse Siddhartha to Hermann Hesse Steppenwolf. You know, they were very different novels. If you look at Hermann Hesse, I'm a big Hermann Hesse fan, and there was a real kind of step change and evolution in the style. And so with the Buddha and the Wolf, the Buddha's Quest, which is book 1, it is very much this fable. How do these Buddhist values kind of show up and act out in this kind of very traditional fable landscape? Whereas in book 2, what I want to pitch this kind of Buddhist archetype into is very much an allegorical world. So it's very much an allegory for our own time and space, and it's very much a kind of work of irrealism. So this kind of fantastical version of what our world is. And the Buddha will be taken on what I'm calling a journey of empire. So he will begin in very much a kind of is that, are you feeding your own wolf there, Richard?
My dog is scratching. He's got a bell on his neck, which I forgot to take off, so it's making a lot of noise. Go on. Throwing cigarettes
So
at him.
I'm taking the Buddha on very much an allegorical journey, and it's a journey of empire. So he begins in a very kind of class-riven society, very pastoral, the kind of land of Pride and Prejudice. And from there, he goes to a very colonial space. So it's kind of like a medieval Jamaica. I'm calling it Spice Island. And he goes to here, and it's to kind of see how these Buddhist values interact with that environment. And then he comes back to Wallachia, which is this kind of post-industrial, sort of medieval post-industrial London, really, for want of a better word. And so what I want to bring is this Buddha on that journey of how do these Buddhist values interact with our own day and age.
Okay.
And so my goal is for the book to be, for me to kind of evolve my storytelling skills. You know, The Buddha and the Wolf was my first novel, and that sort of very simple fable style kind of suited where I was at as a writer. You know, one of the things that I did during lockdown was to read a lot. So to really kind of challenge myself and look at some of the real greats like Dostoevsky, you know, read stuff like The Plague. You know, I've been reading Dune, Frank Herbert recently, real kind of a step change, if you like. So I want it to be a much more modern book, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Right. And how far are you into it so far? How are you getting on?
I've got a lot of notes. During lockdown, I made a hell of a lot of notes. So I've got probably 2 notebooks kind of filled up with spider scrawl. I've been playing the plot out in my head probably for the last 5 years. So I've got all of the characters. And this one, is, the structure for book 2 comes from a mindset book, which is from Robert Greene and 50 Cent, which is a very odd combination. The two of them got together and did a mindset book, and it's a really powerful mindset book that is, I don't know, it's just one of my favorite works because you've got 2 kind of very different personalities, but both hugely successful in their fields and in different ways. And so what I'm doing is having each chapter will kind of look at one of the themes in this book. So a bit like how I've used the ox herding plates to structure book 1, I'm using the 50th law to structure book 2. So it's the whole it's kind of, I don't know, like modern Buddhist mindset. I don't know how it interacts with ideas that are much more of our time to drive things forward, and how that idea of purpose kind of evolves.
There's a in pop music, there's a sort of almost a cliche that the band does a difficult second album. The first one is always a big, you know, they're famous overnight, but the second one is the tricky one. I think it applies to novels too, because you kind of got some confidence from the first one, so you are ready to do something you weren't perhaps able or ready to do when you started the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it may not be the successful combination of the success that the first one was. Assuming the first one was a success.
It's one of them where, you know, I almost want people that really love the first book to be really challenged by the second book, and in that kind of process of the audience being challenged, open up to a whole new audience as well.
Oh, great. It's the way to progress and evolve as a writer. There's no question, but it does come with its own problems and challenges. And I like you, have endless notes and ideas for my second novel, but it's not as easy to make it real as it's sometimes you want it to be.
No, and I think
anyway,
with
we wish
the first novel, you have a kind of, there's an energy, isn't there? There's a kind of, I'm going to do it, you know. Whereas, you know, there's almost like I'm just going to get this done and it's going to happen. And you've got that kind of almost foolhardiness. You just kind of make it happen.
And you start overthinking.
As you say, you've learned a lot, and you really try to write a novel with the second one.
Yeah. Gone is the innocence of sort of, it's like kids who try insane jump the stunts because they just don't know what it means to be injured. Whereas later on in life, you back off and let them do the idiot thing. But still, we've got to keep going, haven't we? That's our job. And as you say, it all ties up with the world as it is today. And if we don't make our point made now, we might never get the chance to make it the way things are going.
Right, exactly. I do feel the book. I've been working on the book for the last 6 years. This is it here, and I do feel it's really kind of come at the right time. You know, that it's ready at this time for this kind of the challenge that we're facing now. Because one of the key points I talk about in the book is this idea of a golden age, of a kind of renewal of humanity through these ideas of the true self, full potential, and finding this golden path, this sense of purpose. Because I think this is one of the things that we've lost so much, any sense of purpose.
I absolutely love the way you say it, and I think the highlights of this interview should be shown far and wide. I doubt I'll ever be seen in a yoga studio myself somehow, but I'm glad you enabled me to glimpse into the other side of the story, temporarily at least, and it's very rewarding.
It's to me one of the things that I kind of really understood through, I trained in India and kind of through my studies of Buddhism and experiences and travel is that there's a kind of there's a lay sort of yoga and a lay Buddhism and a lay kind of stuff that where the people kind of grasp the principles, just like we had with Christianity. Not everyone was a monk or a nun, but everyone kind of had an understanding, if you like, of some of those ideas. And that's what I've really tried to do with the Buddha and the Wolf, is to make some of these ideas successful to people like yourself that I would never meet in a yoga studio. Yeah. But actually, that philosophy, as you found, like you said at the beginning, it's a book I wouldn't have normally picked up and kind of associated with my own philosophy and red pill ideas, etc. But actually, you found there was stuff in there for you.
Massive amount. I congratulate you, and very glad I got you on. And let us know how you get on with the second one. If you ever get to the end of the difficult second book, we'll be ready to interview you again. That'd be great.
Definitely. Get some controversy on the go, Richard.
All right. All the best, Benjamin. Thanks for coming on.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time tonight.